Welcome to the 48-Hour Rule, a UteNation Podcast. The 48-Hour Rule is now in effect. Boys, it's been a minute. We can blame this one on Derek, or I'm not gonna blame it on the little one, man. It hasn't been around long enough yet.
Man,
Congratulations, though, dude.
thank you, man. Yeah, it's entering dad girl era is a fun little step. My boy is 7. Actually, gonna start coaching. Got talking to him by him. I was gonna hold him off from football, but he's like all about it. So looks like I'm coaching football and then hitting the girl dad era this year. So fun times, man. Fun times.
Dude, G's a beast, man. You gotta get him in football. So he's a tank, dude.
Yeah.
I don't remember him not being a tank. So
I know that kid was born just like stocky as hell. So he's having fun. So it'll be cool.
Zach, man, how's life? How's the family?
All is good, man. All is good. How you been?
Doing good, buddy. Doing good. Just staying busy. Nice little breaks. So I mean, I'm not even gonna blame Derek on the break. It was nice to breathe a little bit. So
Yeah, it's a good little break, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then, since the last time we talked, we can talk about this in a bit, but we had a pretty important person that's been listening to the podcast and some good things are coming from it. So looking forward to talking to you about that too, man. But yeah, and then want to welcome and introduce John Leone. John, man, welcome to the group. You're starting to write for UteNation now. Gonna be doing some podcasts with us, and but everybody knows you as the sports editor for the Utah Chronicle, man. How's things?
Yeah, they're good. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So It'll be a good time.
You ready to dive into spring ball, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm hyped.
Dude, so that's perfect segue, actually, guys. We've talked plenty the last little while about obviously the coaching change. Kind of bittersweet. Plenty of differing opinions on it and feelings, and plenty of yo-yos too, right? But it's a new era. Morgan's got a lot of guys excited. He's really kind of energized the fan base and the alumni and the donors as well. So Zach, Derek, man, give me your initial impressions just on just the start of the Morgan Scalley era and how you guys feel like it's been going.
Yeah, for sure. I would just say it's exciting. I think a lot of guys are excited to see how it develops in the spring ball. Obviously, during first quarter, we'll kind of get into it. But, the guys that are kind of head down, going through winter conditioning, they got a lot of recruiting going on. And so, it was cool seeing little tidbits of what they did during winter conditioning. It'll be cool to see how the culture is starting to be formed under, Scalley's tenure and what he's bringing to the team. And I think we'll get more of a view of that as we head into spring ball, which will be exciting. But so that's exciting. And so I think as it continues to grow, from every guy that I've spoken to, everyone's just amped and excited to see what this iteration of Utah football will bring. So all positive.
For sure, man. Dude, so you being from the state, okay, I kind of feel like Utah's gone away from, placing a heavy emphasis on those guys the last little bit. But you can see that renewed focus. And I know that that's something Morgan really wants to pay attention to, man. I mean, I know you've been tied up with the baby the last month, right? I know you've been getting a little sleep. So at the same time, too, I mean, you've been able to scroll, too. So what's your initial impressions on that?
Yeah, I think Utah is definitely a big focus for Coach Scalley just because that's his roots. That's where he knows. That's where he's been able to, really see the fruit of what can come out of Utah. Obviously, I think a lot of his recruiting, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he focused a lot in Texas for many years. But he did a lot of recruiting inside of Utah in conjunction with who was over the state. And I think they all split it up. So, but he's always had a footprint with a lot of big programs here. And I think he sees it as, to win the state is a big feat. If you can go up against BYU and what Kalani can do and recruit, that it puts Utah in a really good spot. So I think there's a lot of positive momentum going forward with it. I think it's a good emphasis for him. He can connect with a lot of the younger coaches that are in high school, right? Has those relationships, continue to build upon those, create some excitement. And so all good things.
Yeah, you know, and here's the one thing, like, give BYU all the credit. Like they really, when Utah wasn't placing enough focus on the state, BYU took advantage of it, right? And they're reaping the benefits. I mean, they've got a lot of good guys on BYU that, you know, are from the state. You look at the Glasgow brothers, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, they actually I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they grew up Ute fans. I know that you know, Utah was like the school that the oldest wanted to go to at one point, right? But that didn't happen that way, and now they're diehard BYU, and I mean BYU's reaping the benefits, right? You know, and so other P4 schools jumped in the state, you know, and so Utah's got to make up some ground, but at the same time too, every effort that they've been doing, putting stuff out, and some of the conversations that I've heard behind the scenes, it's something that they know they want to focus on, and it's resonating with Utah coaches as well as Utah, you know, high school kids and the trainers that are training the guys so much in the off season, which is vital, you know. Zack, man, give me your first impressions, the vibes that you've kind of gotten from the first little bit of the Morgan Scalley era.
Yeah, I mean, everything's been pretty good. Like Derek said, you know, a lot has been, you know, head down type of mentality right now. Good thing is, you know, spring is inching real close right now. So we'll finally be able to see the guys back out there and kind of see, you know, just how Coach Scalley's going to go about everything, right? Actually see these new coaches, right? Some of these guys are former players of Utah, and some of them have, you know, coached at some degree at Utah for a little bit before they went on and did another locations. But so that'd be cool, because that's like my biggest thing, kind of seeing these new coaches, right? Obviously, we got spoiled by seeing the same guys, and we knew what to expect. There was really nothing to intrigue you from the coaches every single year. You knew exactly who they were, what they were going to do, what they were about, and type of players they were going to recruit. So with these coaches, I'm interested in seeing that for sure. So I'm ready for spring ball to get going, so I can, you know, head down that way and kind of see these guys up front and, you know, just see the energy, because there's going to be a lot of energy. That's one thing about Coach Scalley. Coaches with passion and energy, and you always going to hear them. So it'd be cool just to kind of see, you know, how, you know, everybody kind of just integrates all that type of stuff when, you know, things get to flying for real.
Absolutely. You know, you talk about Coach Scalley, his passion and his energy. You know, I know Whit was a workout warrior, right? I can't remember the last day that he's missed a workout. I think even within the transition to Michigan, he probably never missed a workout. But you know, there was that video of Morgan sitting back and benching with the guys, right, and getting everybody going. You know, was that ever something that Whittingham really kind of dove into with you guys and got involved from that standpoint?
Nah, I mean, when I got there, Coach Whit was probably in year 12, you know, 12, 13, somewhere around there. You know, already had won, you know, a lot of games. You don't need to do all that. At that point, you're not even trying to impress anybody. Your resume speaks, right? It's not surprising, you know, I see it all the time when you get a new coach and, you know, they want to sit and, you know, have lunch with you or have dinner with you for a couple of times, you know, as the years go on, stuff like that kind of fades a little bit just because life happens. Things, you know, get to go on, you know, a lot faster or whatever. But that's not to say, who knows, he might just be that guy. He might just sneak in there and do some stuff with those guys for his entire team. We don't know. But I know for a fact that, you know, that's a hype video. That's to get people intrigued. That's to, you know, do a whole lot of other stuff. But, I mean, he's in shape. So, you know, he didn't make himself look crazy on the video. It was edited, but still.
It was edited. It was edited, huh? But no, yeah, you're right. Hype video, but hey, at the same time too, man. I mean, that's authentic. That's authentically Morgan Scalley, you know, and that's where it doesn't always hurt sometimes to have some of the new blood in the program, you know. Which again, you guys mentioned, like there's so many coaches that are new this year after guys that have been with the program for so long leaving, that's from top to bottom. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's good energy. It's renewed new energy that's, in the program. I don't view that as a bad thing at all. I think that's a big positive. But yeah. John, man, you've got a unique perspective, right? I mean, you're going to school up there. So, obviously you come across the guys here and there just through classes and campus, without maybe talking specifics and stuff like that. I mean, what's been the vibe for you that you've kind of gathered just from everything that's been going on since Morgan took over?
Yeah, I think on campus, the vibes seem to be pretty high. I hear people talking about Scalley and, all the stuff that's going on in classes. And I think people are, together pretty optimistic of the future. And I think the facts kind of speak for themselves. Like Scalley's already doing his thing. He's bringing in these guys, like Moss was saying, that have played at Utah, that were on the staff before. It seems like he had a plan. The whole head coach in waiting thing is nice because he's had time to prepare for this. He knows kind of the steps that he's going to take, and he's already putting them into action. So I think that's something to be positive about, and that's sort of encouraging. And then I think the other thing that you can see is he was able to retain a good amount of the pieces at Utah rather than going to the portal. And I think that alone shows that there are guys on the team that have trust, they have faith in Scalley. And I think it would be easy for them to just, walk and go wherever they want to go. But I think those things alone, that Scalley had a plan, he's going through with it, and he's able to retain these key pieces. It's not just like, some guys, it's for the most part the main guys. So I think it's optimistic on campus. I'm optimistic, and I think the majority of people are happy that he's taking over. So yeah, I'm excited to see how spring ball goes.
One thing that I think Scalley did really well this winter, just from like a PR lens or like a culture lens, is just like getting out to the different sports, right? So getting out to the basketball games, getting out to the gymnastic meets, things like that. Just trying to build that, I guess, aura, or that, that familiarity with just the Utah fan base in general, of just rooting for Utah, and just being out there. You saw that a lot with like Kalani doing that with BYU. And so like, I see that kind of playbook, as kind of Zack said, of like, when you're newer, you want to make that impression felt and known that you're bought in to the school, to the community as a whole. So I'm sure there'll be more of that. I think as spring ball goes, it'll be interesting to see how he kind of really wraps his arms around the community.
And yeah, you said it perfect, man. I mean, Scalley's a new age coach. He gets it. He gets what has to be done from an engagement level, right? And he completely understands, how obvious it is that like football is the bread and butter for any university in the country, right? He understands the platform he has and how vital that is to be able to boost up the other teams as well. And he's vocal. He's not even just vocal about it in person. He's vocal about it all over social media, and it's, it's those small little things that I don't think Morgan ever stops doing that. Obviously you never know what's going to happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road, but I keep saying authentically Scalley. That's authentically Morgan Scalley, So I want to say it was our second to last episode we've done. Okay. The one that we had Weddle on with all of us. You guys had talked about alumni relations, right? And alumni treatment, how that had kind of been lacking, right? Man, first off, I want to tell everybody that's watching this, thank you so much for being so loyal to us. And it was funny. The time off, I kept getting people at me. I'm like, hey, when's the next one? When's the next one? I love hearing those things. I love hearing just how much they rely on that and look forward to that constantly, right? But one of them that is a listener to the podcast, which we greatly appreciate, Utah Athletic Director Mark Harlan. And Zach actually came across Mark. What was I want to say the BYU game at the Huntsman Center, right? Harlan pulled you off to the side, saying that he was aware of what you guys were talking about. Dude, anything you can kind of share from that? I know that you've had some conversations with some people through the U and some others coming up.
Yeah, that was pretty cool when that happened. Just because obviously I don't pay attention to who's like listening and watching and things of that nature. So that was cool when he came up to me and we just had it was a quick, brief conversation. Just him letting me know that he's listening to what we say. And, that was just cool and everything. Just because somebody like that who has a lot of sway, obviously within the program and who's done a lot of things for the program. Um, you know, as an alumni, and specifically that topic when we were talking about alumni stuff. Um, him mentioning a few things from the alumni stuff. That gives you some you know, some hope that things are going to change in the sense of just top down, everybody kind of who's involved in making those decisions. It's not just him, alone. So all those people who make those decisions and stuff like that. Hopefully, we can kind of get it to where like I said, I think on that podcast when we were talking about it, obviously playing in the league over the years, you play with so many guys that obviously go to a lot of different schools, some real powerhouse type schools, and you see the alumni um, love that they have for their school. One, like we would have guys, just constantly wearing stuff. I mean, they hadn't played there in 5, 6 years, right? And they constantly are wearing stuff. Obviously, getting stuff sent. Um, and then when they go back, right, it's very easy for them to go back and actually feel like they're home. Because at the end of the day, you know, a lot of these guys, played no matter how much you played, didn't play. None of that part matters. Is the things you did when nobody else was watching is what really makes you an alumni, in my opinion. Like a lot of the guys that didn't play around when I was playing, some of those guys you build way better bonds with than some of the guys that you actually do play with on the field. Um, just seeing everybody being taken care of, like I've seen other programs do for their guys, is like the main thing you want. Because obviously, would I probably even pay attention to it? Because if I wasn't living here, probably not. But since I'm here, I kind of see it, I hear it, I feel it. Um, so it'll be nice, and it's a great timing, honestly, right? With Coach Witt, would things have changed? I don't know. Just because that program and how things were ran, that was status quo. That was what it is, and that's what you're gonna get. But it's perfect timing with Coach Scalley coming in, a lot of different people doing things a lot of different ways. Everybody seems like there's a lot of hands on deck, which is nice. So we'll see where the alumni is going to go from that standpoint. Sly and all those guys have been doing a really good. JC Boone, all those dudes are really the ones, spearheading a lot of different things um, that they're doing, just even outside of the university. Trying to get guys together, and just having that community, because that's like one of the biggest things that a lot of players struggle with. And that's really what it's about, is keeping that community together and letting everybody know that we're still brothers, no matter just because we don't put a helmet on anymore or whatever. Um, so those guys have been doing a really, really good job of trying to bridge that gap, to bring everybody together, because there's so many guys here, older guys. Like I went to a restaurant probably a month ago, and I met two dudes that played for you in the '80s, right? Like, and me being African American, there's not too many African Americans, damn sure, out here, and damn sure look like me. So, being able to go somewhere, and I saw two dudes, and I met them from somebody else, but being able to go to a restaurant where they own this restaurant. One guy was FBI agent for like 30 some years, in the state of Utah and all that type of stuff. But they played in the '80s, and you would never know, right, that you have some players that actually represented you know, your culture, where you're from, or whatever things that you share before you, because you don't see that consistently. You would never, like when I play, I didn't meet alumni. Like that wasn't something that, you know, the alumni didn't come back. Like shoot, even Steve Smith, I didn't meet Steve Smith until I got ready to go to the damn NFL.
Man.
Who else? Fuck. I don't know. Jamal Anderson, I think his last name is Anderson. I met him one time and that was it. Right? Like outside of that, like actual alumni coming through, actual people that you saw, you know, with some pictures on the thing, and if you walk into the facility and you can touch the little board and see all the different people who played in the NFL. None of those dudes came back outside of maybe them donating certain things like that. Dudes didn't come back. So it was hard for players to, you know, that's a big thing. Representation is a big thing, right? Like I think about it in the sense of, because how I grew up, like I was committed to Miami, University of Miami for a little bit, and like I always could see any of those dudes that I wanted to see anytime. Like if it was off season, they were there. Right.
Yeah.
Now, yes, it's Miami's destination. It's perfect. Okay, I got you. But still, like it's a lot of dudes that have played in the NFL that are from here that actually live here. Right? Like Paul Soliai, the Lotulele brothers. You know what I mean? Like a lot of those people, you know, don't come around the program as consistent as they can or should, or you would think, right? But that's a two-way street. It's never a one-sided thing. So like representation matters. Like if I was playing, I would have loved to see these different dudes, right? Because I would have been, dang, okay, this really isn't as far out of reach as I may sometimes think, feel it is. You know, when you're in those days, it gets hard, and you need just a quick little motivation sometimes just to kind of see it. So that's, you know, that's kind of like the reason I like to go around school a little bit, right? Like just to, you know, hey, what's up, how you doing, whatever it may be, just so guys can kind of just see, like, okay, this is possible. It's definitely possible at the school you're at. You don't got to go chasing, you know, X, Y, and Z, NIL dollars every single time something gets rough, right? Like that's like the lens I look at it from, and I know a lot of the other alumni do as well. So it's just about trying to bridge that gap and get everybody on the same page, and you know, it's starting to move the train tracks a little bit, and that's all you can really ask for.
For sure. Yeah, I mean it's a work in progress, right? You know, it's going to take time. I know that they've, you know, done some good inroads to it. I'm aware from talking to a few other former players that, you know, they're a lot more consistent with emails and getting certain things out and just trying to connect that way, right? But want to get Derek's take on some of that too. But Zach, since you mentioned Sly and Jesse Boone, you know, it would be ideal for us to get them on a podcast in the next little bit. I know we can get those guys to jump on and kind of talk a little bit more about it, but we know that there's going to be plenty of former players, you know, from the 70s, from the 80s, you know, on up to more recent, right, that are listening to this podcast. So maybe kind of fill them in on what Jesse and Sly are kind of doing and what they can even look forward to with trying to reach out to them.
Yeah, so those guys, I think it was, can't remember how many months back now, but you know, they kind of been working on this Utah Players Association, um, which is a great thing. So I went to a few meetings, and they have meetings kind of um, throughout the weeks talking about different things, and you know, trying to get everything kind of set up legally and all that type of stuff. So, but you know, they do a lot of great work, just getting people, like I said, community. Like it's the biggest thing. You know, if it's just tailgating stuff, like they have their own tailgating spots, so guys don't have to feel like they can't go tailgate. They don't know anybody, right? There's a spot, right, where guys pitch in, they bring food. I mean, they even do it for, last year they did it for some away games as well for some guys that might live. I think we had some games in California, right? So like Texas, wherever it may be, if you got some Utes there, you know, they was coordinating that, and if guys were traveling to the games, you can kind of link up with those people in those locations. And if it's like events, like watch nights, if guys didn't travel to the game, then you have watch nights. They go, you know, hey, let's go to the bar, right? Let's go over here, go watch the game, just get together, right? Like get the band together. You know, because that's what you miss, like I said, the most. Like those things that just community. So a lot of people sometimes when you leave football, no matter what level you left it on, right? In this case, obviously you would have left it on either the collegiate level or the pro level. When you leave it, sometimes you don't know where else to go. And it's best to have people who have been in your shoes, right? Similar shoes at least, and have traveled where you're about to go into. So that was cool for me. I remember, one of the meetings I went to, just talking to those guys, like, because a lot of those guys hadn't been playing for 5, 10, 15 years. Coach McBride was sitting in there. A lot of the guys some of those guys played for Coach McBride that you just never would have met on a regular day basis, right? And you see, like, you wouldn't even know he's going to the community. Some of these guys are firefighters. Some of these guys are actually in your community, but you would never know and actually get the chance to meet those people. And that's the other part. It's like, connecting through that way. Like, you may need a job. You may need somebody to put in a good word for you, right? A lot of these guys have been able to, Coach McBride was big on that. Coach Witt was big on that. Obviously, getting your degree and stuff like that. So a lot of these guys have been able to do that and just listen to their stories. You never know when you might need that connection or need to know about that connection, or they can point you in the right way, something like that. So it's really cool what they're doing, and it's still growing. And they haven't finalized everything yet, but a lot of people got a lot of hands on deck with that. So it's very encouraging for a lot of players, a lot of Utah former players to get with those guys, hit them up. They know a lot more information than I knew. But that's like the base of it. It's just about getting everybody together, community, knowing that it's Utah, right, for life. It's brothers for life, and that's the main thing.
Sure. Derek, you got anything to add on that, man? I get your life has been chaos for a little over a month now, man. So you probably wouldn't have seen enough of that stuff. But have you seen or felt a little bit of an impact just in that short time with the emphasis they're trying to put?
No, I think it's just really cool that it's top of mind for the program, right? Anything that's top of mind will get addressed. And so I feel like you put it on the forefront, there's some good conversations happening, and I think it'll lead to ultimately good things. And then just to reiterate what Zack said, if there's any former alumni on here, Steven Sylvester, Jesse Boone on Facebook, hit me up, and I can get you a link. They just had an event in February when we were actually in labor, so I didn't make it to that one, but they're coming out with new things every time. I'm sure there'll be stuff dropping. There's an email chain out there, and so positive direction, man. Because to Zach's point, you get done playing ball and you kind of feel like you're out in an island. You don't have that support anymore, and where this could ultimately be a great thing is just making those connections and keeping those relationships further down in life. And from a recruiting standpoint, to tie it back into recruiting, money is money, and NIL is going to be NIL, and however that iteration continues on in years to come. But relationships, I think, are ultimately what will draw back, that can ultimately separate Utah with many guys that maybe are on the fence of, do I take money or do I really just want to stay here at Utah? And if you have, man, I love how a vision of a kid that can see that, man, years and years after, I can be part of a true brotherhood that'll last forever, then that's something that money, can't really buy. And if you have a kid that's on the fence like that, that's something that Utah can use to their advantage, that already has a foundation that hopefully they'll take it to the next level. So that's what I'd say to that.
That's a good point, because you got to find a trademark, right? Like, you need a calling card, because Ohio State is Ohio State. You don't need much selling, right? But Utah is on their way to hopefully becoming something like that, where you don't need much after you just say boom and that's it. You don't need much more after that, right? And people just kind of know the history, they know every single thing, right? So for me, like you said, obviously that part with the NIL stuff, a lot of that brotherhood stuff is dying off. Guys go to 3, 4, 5 different schools. So you never really know. You don't really have a place to, call home, right? And then when you go to the NFL, only a very, very few players actually are able to be in one place for even hopefully 3 straight years or 4 straight years, right? And that's still you don't even call home because every stop is different, right? Some guys can be at one stop for 1 year and be like, no, this is home, right? Versus being in somewhere for 5, 6 years, right? So it's like kind of look at Brady. Brady was in New England for Lord knows how long, and he only went back to get a statue, right? If he can go when he goes to Tampa Bay, it's beautiful, right? Everything is perfect when he goes to Tampa Bay just because of the relationships, right? The people and all that type of stuff. So for Utah, I was talking to somebody that's pretty high up in the Utah university, and I kind of said the same thing, was just about like obviously how do we get people to want to stay, right? Because money is one thing, and that comes and goes, but actually having something where he had a Letterman in his office. I'm like, guys are probably not even gonna know what a Letterman jacket is, like legitimately, like even on a small little thing like that, where you love that. Once you get it, you're like, dang, it's like almost be like being branded, people are in fraternities or whatever. It's kind of like that, right? It's like you feel like you belong to something, right? Like it's like when Polynesian guys, y'all get the tattoos, like right? Like I would watch like Bradley and Lucky when they were getting their tattoos. I'm like, okay, that's so like it's dope because I know like the culture, the history there. A lot of these guys not gonna get Lettermans. You know what I mean? Like that's not gonna be something where they care about, think about, right? And you're gonna see that, and it's gonna be like, dang. So I feel like Utah has a chance to be different because you got to figure out a way to be different, right? Money is money. If you can give this kid 1.5, the other school give him 1.5. What makes you different outside of playing time and stuff like that? So they got a chance to do some really cool stuff. They they got to just take advantage of it. A lot of people here that care about the school want to see school do well in this transition, because this transition is big. At the end of the day, it's a 10-15 year type of thing where things can go ugly, things can go right, but it'll be interesting to see.
You mentioned getting the guys to stay and everything. When it comes down to it, the PE deal is going to be really interesting to see, because you're seeing all these schools with like $35-40 million rosters, some even more, right? With the way that the PE is structured and set up, Utah has the potential to be able to use that much more into that. And I get that like there's just this big battle on like, no, it's rev shared, no, it's this, no, it's that. There's the gray areas, and I wouldn't even call them gray areas, right? Like there's money from that PE deal that can work and just boost Utah that much more, and keep those guys around, even if it's placing more of a focus on the guys that have been with the school for 2 years, right? And rewarding their loyalty, because that's one of the biggest things. Like I'll tell you guys this, and I'm not going to give the actual name of the guy, but when NIL was becoming a thing, he was a prominent guy. He got $20,000 is what he told me. Okay. The three other running backs that were supposed to be within the pecking order with him, or like one of the newer running backs and so on, they all got hired. It's like $20,000, which, I mean, look, like Derek, like I know you guys would have loved to have that extra $20,000 when you guys were at Utah, right? But with the way that college football is in that landscape now, it's just, that's outrageous, right? And this is a person that had been there for a long time. It's like, reward the man, reward the loyalty, not even, let alone the fact that he was a really good, impactful football player. Can talk about that, ad nauseum, right? Again, we can get Sly and Jesse on and some of the other guys to be able to talk about it. I'm looking forward to that, because, I mean, look, like players and alumni, they're the lifeblood of the program, right? It's vital, and it's important to really kind of build that up. And I know it's something that those two have been wanting to do for years, and they're finally getting traction to it. And I absolutely love seeing that, right? But spring ball is coming up. again, first spring of the Scalley era. John, you and me are going to be looking forward to the Chalk Talk that Scalley is going to be doing with the media. I'm looking really forward to, just kind of seeing how that goes, and it's something unique. Outside of the Chalk Talk, lots of different things should be going on. We haven't gotten the full slate on everything yet to know and understand like how different it's going to be compared to the Whittingham era. Derek, Zach, before kicking into like some of the guys that, we're kind of intrigued to see and like what we're looking for in this, take me through some of your spring experiences and just, was it fun? Was it brutal? Was Zach, hey, you've kind of been on record for this, but Doc's just blasted you. He said you hated practice, man. So
yeah, spring practice was the worst practice because that felt like no point. Because you're the only people in the world actually in pads in the spring. And every day in the spring in Utah is not, nice and lovely. You just never know what you're gonna get. So sometimes it was cold, right? Sometimes we were on the turf, which was different. It was hard. You couldn't be on the grass, so they didn't want to kill the grass up too much before fall and all that type of stuff. So practice overall, but spring definitely was tough just because you're like, man, we could be doing so many other things, and you kind of see like people you follow like that was in the NFL at that time, like they're like chilling, right? And then you get some guys that like left. I remember Cody Barton came back. I think it was Cody, but one of the guys who had just left, they come back and they're like, yeah, man, we're just like OTAs is like literally like 2 hours a day, like, and you're like 2 hours a day, like I'm still doing classes, then I gotta go out here and actually like perform because you're fighting for a spot, right? And stuff like that. You're auditioning early on to kind of see where things gonna fall in the fall. And I was like, oh, well, okay. But then you can get hurt. Like that was another thing. It's like spring is brutal sometimes because, like we didn't hold back. Coach Witt didn't hold back on what we were doing. Like when we were going. And that's the type of players we were. Like if we were gonna play football, we were gonna play football. So you can get hurt. Like I got hurt going into a sophomore year. I broke my arm in the spring game, and that's like one of the dumbest things. I get it why you do it. But it's just one of the dumbest things because the potential of players just getting hurt. And unfortunately, I had to go through that. And you kind of like, dang, am I going to be back in time? Like, and then you start the season off a little bit slower than you might want to because you missed the time. So spring overall for me was just dumb just because you got so many different things that could happen that just throw you off. And you could be training, actually getting ready for the fall, which was nice about the NFL because you got so much time to actually just focus on what you need to focus on versus we just playing football because we got the time to do it in spring in college. So it's like, but yeah. So Coach Holly was right. But you can definitely put an emphasis on spring practices.
But hey, and then I forgot, man, you're coaching now. So any of Zach's players that are watching this, Zach loved practice. Zach grinded his ass off. Zach loved practice.
Hey, if you're Zack Moss and you're a 5-star athlete, then you could practice like Zack Moss. But if you ain't, you better practice your ass off, kids. That's all I got to say about that.
Well, definitely practice because in college they give it money, right? They didn't give money when I was in college, so I was like, I don't care about this. I practiced when I got to the NFL for sure. That wasn't a problem. That was one thing Coach Holly told me. He's like, don't carry this shit to the NFL. I was like, don't worry. When they get to paying me, we ain't gonna have no problem about going to practice. Y'all ain't paying me to come out here and practice. It's like, this is pointless. But yeah, definitely practice in high school, and because NIL, you get an NIL now, you gotta set yourself up perfectly.
It's a paycheck. It's a salary. So
Yeah.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
One thing about spring ball, besides the cold ass weather that I remember way too fondly, is thing with Utah, and they're going to have some of that this year, is new coaches. Like we're having a new offense yet again, and yet an iteration. But my experience with spring ball was always, oh shit, here goes another offensive scheme that we got to try and learn, and new terminology that we kind of try to put together, and so maybe offensive side we're a little more skewed. Relating it to this year's team, it's going to be very interesting to see how that translates. They have some guys that are coming back, some playmakers, as John said earlier, that are coming back that they were able to keep. But they're going to have a new system, and say what you want, it's going to be different than last year. It just is. They're going to try and do a couple of the same things, but that's going to be a big part of this spring that I see coming, and relates to, my time when you said that, I instantly thought of just a new offensive playbook every single spring that I was there.
That was wild back then, man. Oh my God. Kyle couldn't keep an OC for the life of him. They ran like the plague, or he fired him or demoted him and kept him on the staff, and that was pleasant, right?
Yeah, it was
poor A-Rod.
Man, yeah, A-Rod probably got that's a whole nother story of that. But yeah, man, so it'll be interesting to see how that transpires.
Oh man, dude. So here's another thing I'm very curious to see happen. I mean, you guys talked at length about the pit being gone. Does Morgan bring back an aspect of that? Because again, for as much as everybody wants to believe that he is mini Wit, his attitude in a lot of ways, I think, is going to be a lot like Urban's. So I can see the pit coming back, but that's, what elements to it, whatever, and so that's going to be a fun and interesting thing to follow. John, I don't know, just because of the amount of time you've been covering the team. I mean, you've seen the guys over in like the sand area doing like the different workouts and stuff like that. That started off with Urban Meyer. And it was just legendary. If guys got hurt, if it was a decent injury or if it was like a nick during practice, their butts were sent over to that pit, and they were, wearing chains, around their neck and doing drills and just, whatever they had to do to stay involved, because he wasn't going to give them a ticket out of it. So, and Kyle took it away this year. So that was, man. So you mentioned the offense. Okay. I take a look at this team, and John, I mean, you give me your perspective on this. But I look at this team, and it's going to have to be much more reliant on the offense this year, which is good. And it's also scary because, one, we've got to see like how the offensive line unfolds, and that's not going to be clear in spring ball whatsoever. If it is, great, but it's not, right? McGivern comes over, and he's much more into throwing the football than Beck was, so even though it's like very similar nuances and everything, Utah's going to throw the ball a lot more, and so that's something I'm really intrigued to see. Give me your perspective on this, man. Like, how different do you feel like this offense can be? And is it a good thing that they're probably going to have to carry this team over the defense going into year one of Scalley?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that this team's going to be more reliant on the offensive side of the ball than it probably has been the last, 10 years or so. But I think you mentioned it. McGivern likes to throw the ball, and I think Scalley, from the very small sample size we got at the Vegas Bowl, is all for it. You look at those Vegas Bowl stats, and I know that was still Beck calling the plays, but at the end of the day, someone's got to give Beck the go-ahead to, let those play calls fly. So you look at those stats, Dampier, 10 yards per attempt passing. That was his highest of the season. That one game outside of Kansas, I think he was 10.1. But then other than that, I was looking, his average was around 7.5 to 8 in the rest of the game. So I think, just airing it out, getting the tight ends involved is something that Scalley seems to want to do more than Utah's done in the past. And I think, with bringing guys in, bringing McGivern in, bringing in Pagan, bringing in Kyrie Scholes, like they're bringing in weapons to clearly try to ramp up the pass game. And I think that's, in this era of college football, it's important because as great as the run game was last season, you saw that it can be limiting. Think to the Texas Tech, the BYU game where, if you fall behind, you get behind the sticks, and then all of a sudden, all right, you got to throw, you got a 2-minute drill. You can't be that one-dimensional with the run game, and it can be so dominant against those teams that can't match up in the trenches with good linebacker play. But then once you get in those passing situations, it gets tough and it's hard to come back in games. So I think being more balanced is a big part of what they're trying to do. And I think, maybe it won't be a pass first offense. I don't think it ever has been, but I think, posing more of a vertical threat is something that needs to be implemented in the offense. And it seems like Scalley's started to take the steps to do that.
Sure. John, I mean, you've covered the team a short amount of time, but you've been around long enough to see the reason I'm going to get this reaction and out of Derek and Zach in a second here. But, guys, I'm going to ask you a question in a second here, and then I'm going to give you guys the reason why it's going to be different, right? Under Scalley. But in your time, and even after you've graduated and then just following the team, okay, the amount of times we've heard, hey, these receivers are good. They're gonna be impactful. Watch out for these receivers this year. Okay, Derek, man, I tell you that I want your reaction. Let's hear it.
Man, it didn't matter what the hell we had at receiver. We couldn't freaking call a play to get them open down the field at third level to make to use their talents if they were talented at that. I think we had talent at receiver. Like, we had some dudes make it to the NFL that had some way better careers in the NFL playing receiver than they did at college. Like, Vele comes to mind as the latest one, and there's a few others from back in my day. And so, like, to me, it's almost like, yeah, that's cool if we have receivers. How good are they at blocking? Because we know what they're really going to be used for, And so that's my first take that hopefully can change.
Zach, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's always a topic about the receivers and the passing game being better. Kind of like John said, pass first offense is hasn't done that, and Lord knows when, probably since Alex Smith. But I got hope for him this year. We talked about it last year a lot. Just like the vertical game wasn't there, like the run game was beautiful, right? That was fun. They had the offensive line that could do it. They had Beck, who was really, really good at calling the plays and knowing when to call them and setting them up and stuff like that. Like, that's like, people don't understand like how good it is to have an offensive coordinator that knows when to call plays. Anybody can call plays. Like, I can tell you to run this play 5 times in a row. It might work twice, but he knew how to actually call them, when to call them, and set up things like that. So they have a lot of things working in their favor. And like we said about the team last year, the run game isn't going to look like that. Doesn't matter if new OC was a run heavy guy or not. Like, obviously, you said like he's a little bit more pass happy, so we know it's not going to look like that at all. But even if he wasn't, to duplicate that in back-to-back years after losing 2 offensive linemen who are going to be first-round picks, like, that's not a real good chance there. So yeah, they got to figure out the pass game. We said that all last year about them actually getting to that championship game. That was something that they had to do because it was highlighted in those games where I think it was the who did they play where they had kind of like a shootout, and thank God they couldn't play any run defense because they would have lost that game. I think it was
Kansas State.
It's
I mean,
Penn State.
Utah couldn't play any run defense either that game.
Yeah, but thank God they couldn't either, because if they could just play an inch, and we wouldn't have been able to throw the ball, right? Look at the Texas Tech game. They stuffed everything, right?
Yeah.
That's a tape that I'm sure, the Utah coaches were not going to show any of the NFL guys on their guys. Like, we're not going to show this tape. This tape is bad, right, when it comes to run blocking. So, they couldn't throw the ball that game. The BYU game, I was there on the field. It was ugly. It was terrible. Like the Tech game was kind of a blur a little bit because it was daytime. I was still kind of tired. But the BYU game was like, bro, these guys legitimately cannot do anything. And the safeties are, 10 yards off the ball. Like, it was bad. Like, bad. When it came to those specific games where they can actually match fire with fire. So hopefully, the guys they brought in, and new OC with the play calling and things of that nature, and the quarterback play, because whoever it ends up being is going to be a guy who's ever more consistent at throwing the ball. I tell you, throwing the ball at 7 yards on average is great. And then finally, your last game of the year, finally hitting 10. That's a nice sign. But hopefully whoever's throwing the ball and whoever emerges as some of the best receivers, hopefully they can do it consistently, because obviously I think the run game is going to be fine. I'm not worried about that at all. I think obviously with Dampier and Bird, Parker, and some of the other guys, and when you have a quarterback that's dynamic and you have two of them, your run game is going to be okay. Yeah. We just got to figure out who these pass catchers going to be, and be able to hit a few deep shots when the game calls for it.
Yeah. And you mentioned something on the quarterbacks I want to touch on in a second here, and we're going to start wrapping this up here. But look, when it comes down to it, Derek, yeah, exactly. Your response on that with you laughing at everything, man. Like that was the past though. Like, look, I've said it. Morgan has a lot of urban to him. Okay. For years, I've been told that Morgan is a steadfast believer that you can have an Urban Meyer style offense along with the trademark Utah defense. And he said as much in his press conference, right? He's adamant about it. So yes, Utah's still going to go to their bread and butter with the run game, which is so effective and so valuable, but you are going to see the passing game be that much more prominent now, right? That's what McGivens' preference is. And that's what Scalley wants. Scalley wants to step on your throat. He wants to step on your throat and beat you by 50. He doesn't want to score 50. He wants to beat you by 50. He flat out said that in the press conference, right? And so that's important with Scholes and Pagan. I love that combo. The only thing that is missing is, they fully expected to have Buchanan too. And so that is the one unfortunate piece, right? But I feel like we're finally going to see the receiving group break out this year and actually have the opportunity to break out, right? Like you guys said, there has been some great receivers come through this program, but I mean, might as well talk about their blocking and not their receiving, right? So lastly, let's talk about this really quick, and then let's wrap. All right. So Zach, you mentioned who is going to emerge as quarterback. This sounds crazy to think, right? Like, and you had Bird as a true freshman in the last year that really broke out onto the scene. He's more known for his running, but he had moments passing. And you can see that the passing is there, right? You had Devin Dampier, who played hurt ever since the end of the UCLA game. And he still ended up leading the guys to, the 11-win season. And when he finally had some time to get healthy again, I mean, look at what he did in the bowl game, right? It wasn't like he was the greatest passer in the world, but it worked. It worked in this system, okay? The thing with Bird is I constantly hear Bird has a hell of an arm. It's his accuracy, right? Bird's not going to come back to the University of Utah with some of the interest that he had and some of the offers that he had without being told that there will be a legit opportunity to see who the best quarterback is. And it's a very, very unique thing that Utah has. So before kicking it over to Zach, John, give me your take and your impression on something like that, and what Bird even has to do to surpass Devin, who, again, Devin would you usually feel like he's entrenched.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head. I think Bird's ceiling is higher than what Devin's is. It's just that he's young. He's kind of a raw talent, as you said. He's working on the accuracy, but accuracy is something you can improve, whereas I think arm strength is harder to do. I think the physical traits are in favor of Bird, but then you've got the experience of Dampier, you've got the running ability, the shiftiness, and Dampier, he knows the game. He doesn't take sacks at all. And I think it's going to be hard for Bird to take the spot. I really don't know what the dynamic is, if they're planning on using both of them, if they're hoping to just get one ahead of the other, or how that's going to go. It's something I'm interested to see, but I think there is a conversation to be had about who, can come out on top if there is a true QB battle. And I think it could be closer than a lot of people expect if it does come down to that.
Yeah. I don't think, I'll say this, battle or not, I don't think Bird surpasses Devin in spring ball. Can it happen eventually? It could happen eventually. You just don't know the progress that somebody who was a true freshman last year getting their feet wet for the first time could make. They could take a huge leap, but what's Devin going to do now that he has an offensive coordinator that is willing to throw the ball a little bit more? And I wouldn't even say that because, Beck deserves plenty of props, right? It's, Morgan is not going to keep them from throwing the ball downfield. They can say that Kyle didn't hold him back all they want. It's very apparent in the bowl game, Kyle held them back when it came to the passing game last year. Right. And Zach, man. So John, dude, when it comes to Zach, I mean, Zach is extremely high on Bird, and so I'm really curious on his perspective on this, because I mean, I know Zach, man. I mean, there were times during the season last year you just kept saying, like, man, Bird is the guy. Let him go.
I mean, the accuracy thing, that's a big thing though, because that's not something you fix in a couple months. And I think Dampier has been accurate. I think he was pretty accurate this past season, in some tight spaces and tight windows and stuff like that, just from the nature of how the play call and the play style they were playing in. There wasn't a lot of space on the field for him to, not be accurate, right? He had to be pretty accurate. And John pointed out a really good, something that doesn't show up, that people don't think about a ton, but it's super, super, super important, and that's sacks. Like, he doesn't take sacks. He's not a drive killer, right? Like, guys like, people, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, right, just holding the ball because of that split second of unsureness. Like, that's what has gotten both of those guys to not be as good as they can be, right? I mean, well, Russ different, but he always had that issue. But his age has now showed that, hey, you can't escape this pocket as much as you were able to do, right? And things like that. Like, if you really think about Russ in Seattle, he could escape the pocket, and he's one of the best rushing quarterbacks, scramblers, the league has ever had. But people don't really put those two things with him, because of not designed runs or whatever. But so, like, the accuracy thing is something big. Like, obviously, I played with Anthony Richardson, and huge arm, all the talent in America. But when you don't have the accuracy, right, and you just got the strength, the power, the zip, all that type of stuff, right? Like, you can go throw a ball right now into the side of a hill, right? I'm sure you got a strong arm, right?
Yeah.
But if you actually got to hit a target, a moving target, like crossing routes, drag routes, all these different type of things, like, those things matter. So, I mean, I think, like I said, I thought he overall could be better, because last year he was the unknown, right? He was unknown. People didn't have tape on him, but that changes this year. People gonna have tape on him. They're gonna use them both, regardless of whoever is a starter. Just because Dampier's a senior, right? He played hurt, like you said. So from respect and all that type of stuff. Obviously, Scalley respects both of those guys a lot because he had them into the coaching hires and all that type of stuff. So both of those guys have a lot of respect within the program. So they're both gonna get the respect when it comes to the reps and things of that nature and the playing time. But yeah, I think Dampier is gonna be the guy, just because you know what you got, and depending on how much faith they have in this team, right? It's not like it's we're looking at the Jazz where you can put a player in for 3 quarters and you pull them for the fourth because the game's too damn tight. So depending on how good this team is, how much faith they have in them, they really believe they can go get back to where they were last year, right? And they just 2 teams away, BYU and the Tech. They feel like they're that close, then it would be no question that you have to go with Dampier because you know what you got. You know the type of leadership you got, right? Bird might be a guy that just might need to sprinkle a little bit more and give more opportunities. And, with the passing game, we'll see how that goes because that's going to be at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who the guy is. The passing game and the receivers catching the ball and actually giving the QBs a target to actually throw the ball to. That's going to be the biggest thing at the end of the day. So we'll see how that goes. But both of those guys are really, really good. Both respected, like I said, in the program. They both going to have a huge imprint on the offense more than anybody else, regardless of if they're only playing 50% of the snaps, for each other.
Exactly. Look, I mean, the likelihood of one or the other finishing the season fully healthy as the starter, it's next to nil, right? Utah's going to need both of them to come through clutch throughout the entire season. But at the same time, too, you both said, Utah's going to find ways to use both. You have to. They're too damn dynamic, right? And, when it comes down to it, Bird's got all the potential in the world. Same time, too, Devin showed what he's capable of in that bowl game. Well, UCLA and then the bowl game when he's actually had time to heal up and be relatively healthy, right? And, and then trusting him more with the passing game in the bowl game, And so that went a long way to show, okay, look, Bird is getting there. Bird is close, but Devin is special, So just the fact that people can still sit back and say, there could technically be a quarterback competition, and how much improvement is Bird going to show? That speaks volumes to Bird. That doesn't do anything to dismiss anything with Devin. So. All right, guys, we're going to be wrapping this here. Derek just texted me. He had to run off to the newborn there. So, man, Zach, John, appreciate you guys. Derek, if you can hear us in the background, appreciate you as always too, man. We'll be getting this going spring ball as well. So, took a nice little break. It's fun being back, man. Zach, I missed you, bro. So, dude. As always, man, close us out.
Yeah, it's good being back. It's good to be back. So make sure you guys continue to like, subscribe. Make sure you tell your friends this is the best podcast to get all your Utah football info. So as always, go Utes.
Appreciate you, boys.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the Players Lounge.